Heyo everyone, and a very merry yippee-ki-yay because we're talking about the Sega Saturn Die Hard games today. Today we're going to be talking about Die Hard Arcade and Die Hard Trilogy, two separate games that both released in 1996 and 1997. And I don't mean that they were released separately in 96 and 97. I mean they both released in 96 and in 97. You see, first Die Hard Arcade came out and enjoyed some time in the arcades in the year of 96. Then in 97 it was ported to the Sega Saturn. Meanwhile, Die Hard Trilogy came out on the PlayStation first in December of 96. And then in January of 97, it would later be released to the Sega Saturn and Microsoft home computers. Now, Die Hard Arcade came from very unlikely beginnings. Sega had overproduced their Titan boards, which were basically arcade Sega Saturns, but they were still weaker than the Model 2. So, they also just happened to have obtained the rights to publish Die Hard games. However, they could only produce them in the US at this time and not Japan. So, in Japan, the game released as Dynamite Detective. Dynamite Detective was just a simple texture swap, but would later go on to spawn its own sequel, Dynamite Cop, which came out on the Dreamcast. And that one's even more ridiculous and over the top. Dynamite Cop contains a cameo from the chicken leg enemy from Golden Axe. You guys know how much I love Golden Axe, so I had to put this in here. Meanwhile, Die Hard Arcade is credited as being one of the first beat-em-up games to use textured polygons. It also incorporates QuickTime events between missions a whole 3 years before Shenmue would come along and popularize them in the medium. Also, if you mess up the QuickTime events, it plays this funny little scene where you mess up the attack, and then you have to fight extra enemies. The game also has a rudimentary crafting system of sorts, because you can pick up a lighter and combine it with a paint can to create a flamethrower. I couldn't get footage of that for this video, but it is in the game, and it's interesting to note that it was incorporating crafting long before Minecraft came along. The fighting mechanics in this game are extremely advanced for a beat-em-up as well. They resemble something more like a mixture of that and standard fighting games. You can pull off different button combinations to do different combos of attacks, leading to various flipping kicks and throws and beatdowns. The game was even slated to release as a sort of 2.5D game that was played fully on a 2D plane, but late into development they decided to switch it to a 3D sort of environment. Die Hard Arcade also included a copy of Deep Scan for some reason. It's an old archaic arcade game. You play as a battleship dropping depth charges, and submarines firing torpedoes try to sink you. Due to the amount of time that it takes for your depth charges to sink, though, it's more about luck than skill as to whether you'll actually hit anything. So that being said, fuck this shit. Now, Die Hard Trilogy was developed by UK-based Probe Entertainment, and they had just come off of creating the hit title, Alien Trilogy. I don't really know that much about it, but if you guys would like to see me cover it in the future, leave a comment in the comment section. The game consists of 3 separate games, though I've heard several conflicting stories on how that agreement was settled on. One story claims that the driving section was originally gonna be the whole game, but then Fox Interactive wanted more and said that it didn't represent the movies well enough, so they had to slap 2 more games on to make the full game. And another story says that the developers overpromised and then had to cut corners to fulfill the deadline. Either way, it's clear that this game could have benefited from more time in the oven. Now, much like Die Hard Arcade, Die Hard Trilogy would also get a sequel, but it's exclusive to the PlayStation. This is a Saturn video. However, I have heard that the PlayStation version of Die Hard Trilogy just runs better, so maybe I'll check it out in the future. Let me know if you guys want me to cover the 2 PlayStation games down in the comments and I'll look into it. Now, the first game in the trilogy is based on the original Die Hard. You run around Nakatomi Plaza, and you have to fight your way through several levels, defeating bad guys, and freeing hostages. Now, the game suffers from this nauseating, transparent wall effect. On the PlayStation, this would have been transparency, but the Sega Saturn doesn't really do transparency, so they had to settle for this meshed sprite effect, and it can be a bit hard to look at. They did it on the glass, they did it on the walls, it's on everything. I, on the other hand, adore this meshed sprite look, but I understand that a lot of people can't stand it. You can pick up bulletproof vests and food to help protect yourself better from the bad guys, and you can also find gun upgrades that'll temporarily give you better weapons. The game also benefits from some top-notch voice acting. I mean, just listen to it for yourself.
Ho ho ho! I've got a machine gun! Don't let him get away. No turkey? It's Christmas! Don't let him get away. Great! Great! Great!
Give up, you're surrounded!
Happy trails! Ooh! Yippee-ki-yay!
The second game is based on the second movie, Die Hard 2, Die Harder, and it's an on-rails shooter. Oddly enough, even though the game was primarily designed for the PlayStation, it's incompatible with the Namco Gun-Con. However, on Sega Saturn, it is compatible with the Sega Stunner. So in that way, you could say the Sega Saturn version is superior in that it works with a standard light gun. However, that more or less just makes up for the fact that the rail shooter bit runs like shit on the Saturn. Now, I had to use a controller for this, and let me just say that the controls are unbearable on controller. The cursor has a tendency to drift farther than it should, so you have to learn to let go of the button before it actually reaches the target. Otherwise, you're gonna overshoot. Originally intended to feature fully modeled 3D enemies, engine limitations forced the developers to switch over to using digitized sprites like in Donkey Kong Country. It leads to some rather less than appealing sprites, to say the least. The civilians regularly run directly in front of the enemies, using their bodies like human shields. So, really, they're hurting you more than helping? In a better game like Area 51, the developers would have made sure that there were no enemies directly behind a friendly target. Thankfully, I think the developers also realized that this rail shooter bit was bullshit because they included a code. If you hit CABBY twice on the copyright screen, you can access a menu from the pause screen to give yourself invulnerability. Now, the third game in Die Hard trilogy is based on the third movie, Die Hard with a Vengeance. It's based on the taxi scene from that movie, and you drive around New York. The music in this section is absolutely ridiculous, with the rapper repeatedly saying, "Yeah, I'm doggy, 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 doggy," over and over, and it gets grating pretty quickly.
Right up here. No, please, no! Oh. Don't stop. Someone give me some aspirin.
The game has some super floaty arcade-style driving physics, and to some people that might be appealing, and to other people that's a detriment. It really depends on your tastes here. I like watching my car bounce off the other cars, though. I think that's funny. You can acquire additional points based on how many pedestrians you don't kill, which might speak more to how easy it is to cause collateral damage in this game. There are also pickups in the form of additional points, as well as time extensions, nitro boost. You can even call in an ambulance that pushes all the other cars out of the way, like some sort of bulldozer. Now you can change vehicles, but the only one I ever found was this squad car, and I couldn't really find anything else. Wikipedia claimed that I was able to get a dump truck, but I couldn't find it. However, if you're a die-hard fan of Die Hard trilogy, you could go out there and create a wiki and list all the different cars in the game and how to attain them. Just saying, there's a void there that needs to be filled. Now, the game doesn't really state this outright anywhere, but I discovered that if you press the shoulder buttons on your controller, you can do a sharp turn. If you do it at an intersection, you'll do a 90-degree turn around the corner. And if you do it in the middle of a road, you'll do a 180 spin and go back the other way. So that's helpful. It is pretty awkward from a control standpoint, though, and not exactly the most conventional driving controls that you'll see in a video game. And with that, guys, have a happy holiday and happy trails. I'll see you all in the new year. Ciao for now, and Hexi out. Thanks go out to my Patreon supporters. Your donations mean the world to me, and I thank you for supporting my future endeavors.